Hi, my name is Benedict for Higher Hertz. In this video, we're looking at G3 Multibus Comp from SSL, Solid State Logic. Now, honestly, I saw this come out and I thought, nah, that's not going to be for me, because I do have an issue with multiband as a general rule of thumb, which we will discuss in a bit. But then I saw another reviewer looking at it and it was like, ooh, that's rather impressive. So I figured I would put my hand up when it came around and said, yeah, we will have a look at this. It's not going to be an immediate fanboy thing because, as I say, I have some concerns with the multiband approach, but nonetheless, it does seem like it does a rather good job. So if you can balance the bads with the goods, and it's in your budget, then it's a thing worth considering, perhaps. So what we'll look at is the device, and we're also going to do some comparison here as well. We will just pop this one sideways for the moment so that we can do some A, B's and C's. Here is our music running through the SSL. Here is our music not running through anything. Back through the SSL. Now it's only in single band, to be fair, but as we're also going to look at, here it is, running through Reason's comparable device. Clean. SSL. Reason. That's interesting. I will strongly encourage that you be using a good monitoring situation. I don't encourage these ever, but I guess if that's all you've got, but if you're trying to listen to this or anything I do on your phone, you're probably not going to hear any difference at all, or you probably hear more illusion. The differences here are subtle. When you're working at this kind of level, everything is subtle. You can use this a bit more aggressively, and we'll look at that as an option, but it is designed more for subtlety. I think this works really nicely. I think it brings a nice little extra something, which was the whole idea behind this device, which we will talk about. In terms of comparing it to the Reason device I have read quite a few times is supposedly one of the better emulations of the SSL master bus compressor that sits up in the corner just across the masters. Exactly why this device was put in, its design, its fundamental application, I have never really known. I don't think that it was ever meant as a mastering compressor, but it has made its way into many mastering rigs, and while I don't use it, I have. It appeared on lots of my own records, and obviously therefore clients' records. I do use the principle behind it. Was it put there by SSL just for engineers so that they had a workable mastery kind of a thing, so that when they sent people home with a cassette that they didn't feel like the mix sucked too badly? So whether it was just designed to give a quick impression of mastering, or whether it was meant as a genuine part of the signal chain that was ultimately going to go on record, I'm not sure, but it did end up on plenty of records because it works nicely. The concept here is of what's commonly referred to as glue compression. I refer to it as groove compression because that's how I was taught it. This is never designed to be hacking off at the top. It is not designed as a limiter. There are still too many people who try to use compression like it's a limiter or a clipper and wonder why they don't get coolth out of it. Compression as used here, and the way that I use it most of the time, is to create groove. We will look into that as we work through the walkthrough and how the device is going. Both of these two options do provide that, but you might notice that the Reason one is prone to becoming a little dull. The SSL actually has a little bit of a boost. There are a couple of reasons behind that without getting into all of the guts of what's going on, but obviously it has a little bit of a sound goodify effect, which is not intrusive. The video that I did watch, it seemed like a very dramatic sort of a rise. It was a really nice rise, but it seemed like a very dramatic sort of a rise. And one of my concerns was going to be, is this just a sound goodifier? As in, like, is it one of those press this button and suddenly your crappy mix will sound amazeballs because we've just frou-froued it? No, that does not seem to be the case at all. SSL, before we understand the importance of this or the apparent relevance or amazeballfulness of this, we should have some understanding of SSL and where this fits. SSL, Solid State Logic, released a console in the early 80s, the SSL, and it quickly became kind of like the go-to desk. It was incredibly logically arranged. It was easy to use, and it just sounded good. The Neves that lots of people used before were a great desk and sounded really good, but the SSL was a lot cleaner, but not entirely clinical. So that combination of great workflow and a really good sound, and then on top it had this little glue compressor, which when used well just gives a real kind of groove without having to go outside off the box and add more noise and this, that, and the other, was very, very attractive. In terms of the product, SSL, I don't know how much SSL's devices are really programmed by SSL or whether they're brought in sideways from someone else. So how much of the true SSL engineer who's working on something like a real SSL is working on this is the case, but that's the same when you buy a Honda. You watch an advert for a Honda and they talk about their racing heritage. How much of a W12 engineer is working on your Civic? But nonetheless, Honda's cars are definitely okay, more often than not. SSL stuff seems to be okay, more often than not. I actually think quite highly of this device in the short term that I have been playing with it. It hasn't gone into serious battle in that it's not appeared or been worked into a real mix because I try to keep that separate from the demo work. It's not fair. We're looking at a $200 device, so it's not cheap. But that's, I guess, part of the whole SSL thing. They have some of the cheaper products, like their audio interface, not the cheapest audio interface in the world, but it's not expensive either compared to many other things. So their stuff's a way in. I hear some people kind of rave about them as though they're some sort of secret UAD. That always puts me off. Maybe they are great. This I have been pretty impressed with. If this is what came inside my door as a stock, I'd be like, yeah, that's really impressive. But we have to also take that's another $200. Is that another $200 impressive? To some extent, you're going to be like, well, that depends on the situation. And yes, it depends how serious you are on what you do. If you just think that spending $200 is suddenly going to make you more pro, then I think that you're going in the wrong direction. Not because of the product, but just because I think you're going in the wrong direction. If you know how the $200 is really going to justify itself because you can already use all your existing devices well enough to, well, not need this, then maybe it's a good call. There is also the option, the old subscription model thing of every SSL plugin for $15 a month. Not a fan of those, so I'll leave that path up to you. But in theory, the name is a great pedigree. The question then becomes, is it good enough? Does it do the $200 job? But please don't ever think that spending $200 here is suddenly going to up your game. If you think that buying a plugin is going to up your game, I'm sorry, but you are really deluded. You need to work out how to get these sorts of results with your existing tools. So once this becomes, I don't really need it, then you are in a position to justify whether the $200 is worth it. Let's start to have a walkthrough. We're going to do this a little differently from the way that I normally use it, using a lot of examples. So we've got a nice elegant interface. You've already seen that we can resize this puppy. If I had bigger monitor, 4K, then it would give me other sizes as well, so it'll go big. It is nice and clear. It really is very nice and clear. That's a big winner in my book. We've got a main bypass, which is great. Very clear. Several layers of letting us know that whether it's off or on. Our meters turn off. Our light lights up or goes off, even down here. So very nicely thought through there in terms of just this one button, that it exists and that it has such a total flow through. It makes it very easy to see and feel whether this is on. We can obviously turn each section on and off, and it has the same flow through as well. We can pop things into solo, which we'll look at. You've got each of your sections. They are all duplicates of each other. You can link or unlink these bands. So if we turn off one band, then this band is just bypassed. These are in action. This is bypassed. Each of these is the same. I didn't find whether there's a way to change, say, all of our thresholds all at once, but remember, I never RTFM unless it's truly vital. If you can't, it's not end of the world. Might be nice if you can't as a feature request. But I'm not going to say that it's a bad thing, because overall the device is very elegant and not everybody's going to want to do that thing that I'm talking about, but maybe there's a key command or something like that. There is, however, a key command that if you press Shift, that it ties these two together. That's kind of interesting. There is an undo function here. Actually, let's just have a look. Does it respond to Control Z? Yes, it does. That's good. I don't like plugins that don't respond to Control Z. Falcon. Alrighty. Then we've got the ability to view the bands in two ways. Change our main inputs and outputs. Those two don't appear to tie. Oh, hang on. Actually, yes, they do. So they have the same thing that you can tie one to another. Control Z undoes. We've got undo, redos, A and B modes. I'm not a fan of that. I've spoken about before. I think if you're saying, is this better than that? But I can see why some people do like that. I'm far more of the, wade in, go, yep, does that work? I'll decide whether that worked well, obviously in the session, and sometime later when I'm listening somewhere else. There are presets, didn't even try one of them, because I think if you're going this and buying and using presets, you are truly on the wrong path. We can pop into an HQ mode, which again without RTFM I assume is oversampling, and then we can turn on a pretty helpful help thing, which has layers of helpfulness within its help thing at times. So that's pretty cool. We're going to run with that off, because part of this is about how usable is this product. Now, before we go further, I'll get into my good and bad. Okay, I think it's relatively obvious. I think this is a good one. You have to justify whether it's $200 good, as I've said, so I'm not going to get into price. It's not cheap, but it's not stupid expensive. It's not like we're asking $400 for something. You can get similar-ish sorts of units, but it's the first time I've been tempted by a multiband anything. The architecture is elegant. If you don't know how to use these sorts of things, you might be confused, but that's not the plugin's fault. The architecture is elegant, which is what we would expect from someone with a pedigree like SSL. The SSL was an elegant console. Reason copies, clones the look of the SSL. They don't clone any of sound or anything like that, but they clone the look of the SSL, and it makes it a joy to use. Not that I use that most of the time, but Reason's always been about elegant workflow. This is elegant, so big ups. It's a big win just on that alone. There is a 4K circuit, which we'll discuss a little bit more as we go, which I think is nice. That's the sound goodifier part of it, the saturation thing. Exactly what their proprietary math is, I do not know, nor do I care. Overall, this sounds nice. Even without the 4K thing in, it does sound nice. Again, digital's digital, everything sounds good, but some things do sound and move nicely. I'm more interested in the feel of it. So where I say sound nice is that you get a nice feel from this. We need to, in many ways, stop using the word sound because people have taken sound to mean something literal. So they're getting out their plug-in doctors and comparing, and it's like, really? Music is not about technicalities. Leave that to rocket scientists. Music is about feel. If it feels good, if it moves nicely, it sounds good. So all really good things, and they are the important good things. They are the reasons to adopt, to marry or something. I'm supposed to look at bads, and honestly, I haven't come up with one yet. Maybe in use, maybe in battle, I would find something. Yeah, I've raised the possible can we move all our thresholds in lockstep. Haven't RTFM, so I can't say that it's a bad. It is easy to overdo. But very importantly, I'm saying this is not the fault of the device. It's so elegantly built, but the danger is that I see people using these sorts of things, all kinds of things, and it's overdone. I just took in a mix recently, and their mix is just overdone. Everything is overdone, and then they're running to try and solve their overdonedness, thinking that if they keep overproducing, that somehow they will find the magic ingredient. I just told you what the magic ingredient is. Does it feel great? If it doesn't feel great, alive and all of this kind of stuff, then you do not know what you're doing, and you need to back the hell up, buddy. And if you don't know how to move forward well without layers of overproduction, hire someone who knows how this works. So do not overdo things. If you are overdoing it, it's your fault. It's not the plugin's fault. The plugin makes it very easy to use, which means if you are hell-bent on overdoing it, it's going to happen, but that'll be your fault. We will look, before we get too deeply into the walkthrough, into the multiband approach. Traditionally, we have one compressor. It compresses the whole signal. It takes everything it hears, our spectrum. We can hear that there's a lot more, we'll see that there's a lot more level here than there is here. Therefore, what's happening here, keys. It causes this more compression. If we unlink these, you see the amount of compression suddenly going down. So the perceived advantage, and it's a genuine advantage, is that we can apply compression more where it's needed. To borrow from, I think it's Nurofen advert, which is bogus too. There are some good things about that, in the sense that we get less push here and a lot less squish here. If we compare, again, the SSL sound here against the Reason sound, we notice that this tends to get a little flat. If we put this back into multiband, you have that kind of brightens up and opens up. Compare that to the Reason one, which goes flat. To be fair, the SSL has the 4K thing on. Actually, let's be more fair and actually turn it off. Wouldn't be kind of nice if there was a general 4K button, but again, that's just more layers of buttonage, which might be a bit of a pain. So SSL and multi, Reason. The Reason does feel flatter. The thing that we look for, and the advantage, even though I'm not keen on it, with this is that now this is responding to just this bit. This is responding to just this bit. This is responding to just this bit. So we're not having the compression of what's happening here really being keyed by this. Now the plugin has a way of assessing that. We can take this and have the plugin listen to it less. So this is what's called changing the key setting, or what these days people call the side chain. So now it's listening to a lot less of that bass. So we've reduced our compression dramatically. We can even... Oh, this isn't going to let us do that, but... change. So if I tell it to listen to even more of that kind of cymbal sound, then it starts to compress it heavier. If I want it to compress it a little less, then I can pull it back. So you can achieve a fair amount of the multiband thing by simply pre-processing your signal, your key sidechain. So it's not the only way to get there, but we can also get into turning them off. The multiband thing. So the multiband thing says, I'll just listen to this bit and make all my decisions on that bit. Just listen to this bit, make all my decisions on that bit. You can do the same kind of thing as well, and the same up here. So as you see, dramatically reduced compression here. It's really only happening here when there's stuff happening here. And seeing there's nothing triggering our compressors up here, we're not compressing that at all. So the advantage is that we need less compression overall. We're targeting where we need compression, and we should have less squishification of the whole mix. It seems to me a certain amount of the time that people grab multiband simply because they don't know how to process their key, or they don't have a device that makes it easy to process the key. And that is a true thing. It's much easier in a DAW like Reason to pre-process your key than it is in many other situations where it just isn't that easy to manage things at that level. In which case, if your device, the compressor that you bought doesn't have an EQ that's nice to use on the key signal on the sidechain, then you just don't know that you can even do it. So you go, oh, well, I need a multiband. There are, however, some problems with this. When used on an individual sound, this can be very cool. It can allow you to sculpt elements of a sound, or if somebody's given you a drum kit that's just globbed together, a stem of the drum kit, then you can perhaps balance some things a little bit this way, but you can do it with the EQ-y thing that I just showed you as well. The problem we get is a lot of these, and this is intended primarily for master bus use, is when we put this on the master bus, think about what's happening here. What's happening here is that we have a whole piece, we've got our timbral balance, the balance of the whole piece that the mix engineer has made, and when we compress, it all goes up and down like this at once. And you're saying, but that's what we need to solve. And it's like, no, you haven't thought. What happens is this goes up and down, and the whole room goes up and down like this. This is the same as what happens in the real world. When somebody lets off a grenade close to us, the whole world closes down. Hopefully people don't let off grenades near us too often, but the whole world closes down. When we go into a multiband kind of a situation, what happens is that the world starts to move like this. I've only got two hands, but if I had three hands, you would see the world moving like this. So the room, the reverb space that our whole piece is in, and it should be in, the world starts to do this. And it's dramatic. You go, ooh, it is dramatic. But it's also stressful, because in the real world, remember, grenade goes off near us, the world does this, in lockstep. We only have one band. If our world keeps doing this, like if you're talking to somebody and they're doing this the whole time you're talking to them, you go, dude, it's really unsettling. So it can be very problematic. With minor amounts of compression, possibly less dramatic, But just understand that if you're A-Bing and you're going, some of that may be the adrenaline of WTF, this world keeps warping. So be very careful that you don't warp the world, that when you A-B and listen to it for 5 seconds, you go, hell yeah, because that's your adrenaline. That's like getting to punch Bruce Willis in the face, which is probably very unkind these days. That's all very well until he punches you back. And the problem is that if you've warped your room and created a stress for the listener, they won't know why. They'll just go, this creeps me out, I don't like this, and leave, which is equivalent to Bruce Willis punching you back. That's an unintended consequence. So please just be very careful. So that's the overall of what this does. Let's put it into action. We're going to run through 3 sounds. First is a Berlin School arpeggio pattern. Sounds nice. We set our threshold. This will distort. And before you go, but that's a bad thing, no, it's actually a good thing because that's what real things do in the real world. Simply because if we start to compress very heavily, very fast, then we do what's called wave shaping. In other words, it distorts. So set your threshold. You can tie this to your makeup. I'm not sure how wise that is. Alt-click zeros it. So now we're setting our compression. We can set our ratio to very soft. Now remember, I'm not going to spend time leveling everything. This does not auto-level, and I think that's a really good thing. Some people will be like, but again, that's the difference between looking at sound technically or looking at feel. If you can't differentiate the loudness paradox, whatever's louder sounds better, then you're probably not ready for this, as in this kind of work, let alone buying a device like this, because you're waiting for someone to do it for you. So we can have very soft compression, which is really nicely just smoothing and evening off. Yeah, that's very, very smooth. We can go up to 10:1, which is not quite limiting, but it's done close enough. So we can be then very heavy-handed. If you watch me, you'll see that I always set up a compressor by going highest ratio, slowest attack, slowest release, finding the point at which I like the attack, finding the point at which I like the way it releases. Now, because this has got a rhythm and I want to emphasize that rhythm, while the smooth thing is very nice, it's not much fun in rock and roll to have smooth. That's Kenny G. And this should not be done necessarily on the sound alone, but in the context of the piece. But here, I can feel that this is groove. So we can feel the groove of this happening. And you can say, okay, that's pretty cool. Now we can either relax our ratio or our threshold. I always go to the threshold first. And then decide that's good. Feel how that's pretty flat now? And we can feel that grooving. This is groove compression. Glue compression and groove compression are the same thing. So when you come to using this in the masters, that's what you're trying to achieve. This is perhaps a little more dramatic than a piece, but nonetheless. So now we might add in the bass bit. Sorry, I should just keep this running. So how do we want this to process the bass? Firstly, we can say, well, where do I want this to transition? We can see that here, or drag it here, or this way. They all behave slightly different, but they're pretty elegant. This shows us our threshold, this shows us our signal. If we view it the other way, we get to see a spectrum view, which is split. So in the Surface, this is easier. And we'll assume that we want these to be the same to start with. See how we've got different thresholds, but it's now processing those two halves differently, so it makes it more interesting. We can choose where we want to have that transition. And that has to be done on feel. If you're opening it up and going, well, that's on like... do it by feel. So this fits the meter, the pulse of the music. And we can bring in our top. Again, we can drag that backwards and forwards, or grab that or this and set where we want to process things. We don't have to have these the same. Let's say I want to be really harsh on my top end. Yeah, that's quite dramatic now. Flat. We'll just look at adjusting our output, so it's roughly the same. Now within a mix, the listener's not going to be thinking, gee, multiband compressor, but they're going to hear this groove at the beginning and then slightly different, and then it created a lot of punch. So this is how a compressor should be set up. This is what compressors are really for, more often than not, in terms of being creative. They're using to lock levels off. You probably should be looking at a limiter, or even better, a clipper. So we've now got this really nice reshaping of the groove, and this is doing that super nicely. This was the first thing. I wasn't going to do the Berlin School thing, but I was so pleased with how it came out, because as a big fan of Berlin School, I've always struggled to get that really cool riff thing and never fully understood how they did it. And I'm starting to think that this may have been something that was done because you get this really cool result. So that's one type of sound. Now we'll move to the big rock track, Catstock Rock. Oh, that sounds impressive. Again, I'm going to suggest that we start with single band. I'm going to put them to what I would use as a default. And short, 0, threshold there, threshold up there, 30, 10, and short. Let's zero this guy as well. So whilst we've got nothing happening, let's look at the 4K circuit. This is some kind of saturator. Yes, you can do a 50-100% mix if you want. Drive goes to 11. Well, that's impressive. It's very Spinal Tap of USSL. We can hear it get a little, but it's nicely a little. Obviously we can set this per band. Again, we've got the option to be able to choose how we do that. I've shown you that, so we don't need to worry about that now. Now, normal rule of thumb that's advised is that you set your threshold and you're looking for about 3 to 4 dB of gain reduction. Now let's look at where we want the attack to be. I like that for the attack. And remember here, we're not looking for sound quality, we're just looking for feel. That grooves really hard. So I'm going to say I like that. There is the auto mode, but that just makes some sorts of decisions. And it can be really nice, but try not to rely too much on the auto mode. So if I say, yep, look, I'm happy with that, and I'll set my thresholds back to that. And really listen to the and you've gotten a lot more yeah, how that's a bum, 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 which is what we want. It's feel. So that's doing that nicely. Maybe a little heavy-handed, and then we can say, where do we want our okay, cool. We've lost some level, but we expect that. Let's put it out into multiband now. We can solo these bands, and again just do the how do I find the point where bass is generally slower, but you might want to make it seem like it's tighter. Okay, fair enough, I'll buy that. There isn't really a way to bypass that as easily, but that's to be expected. So we got 2, let's say sort of 4 there. Obviously, working in solo is a little bit of a funny thing to do in this situation. Is definitely pulling out the kick drum. Whether this is a good or bad idea is irrelevant in many ways. Simply a case of understanding how do we set ourselves up. And that does sound a lot freer, at the danger of having warped that room. And we can open up our top ends now. Now we're going to decide where we want our crossover to be. They default to quite high, fair enough. I'll go a little lower just because, why not? Now, highs tend to be really delicate. See how that gets uncomfortable? It's like, yeah, it's hard, but it's uncomfortable. So we would either need to soften that with like a lot less. Sort of going, okay, yep, the groove is good, but have that run just a little differently. But what I hope you hear there is that as that comes in, we've got a really pretty dramatic sort of a feel. Now, again, this is quite academic because I'm not sitting back and mixing a whole piece. It's a section of something, and it has no greater purpose other than for showing what can be done. But that's kind of the way that I would be setting it up. You can either set all your thresholds and all of your numbers here the same, and then just allow the multiband thing to ease the compression thing. But this kind of compression is about getting a groove, so I figure you might as well get in, and they've given us knobs to encourage us to do this and make each part move. So long as your room itself is not warping, and it's impossible to tell in advance, then you can get a more dramatic outcome. Clean. SSL'd, reasoned. The SSL does seem to be bringing a nice kind of a, yeah, that's cool. And let's go a third time, this time with a far more delicate piece of my own, which is the one written with Falcon. One of many now written with Falcon. Now in headphones I'm thinking, that clank clank, I'm not loving. Obviously this mastering doesn't belong to this piece, but let's adapt it a little bit. So I can have it heard more using the wheel. I can just find that area. Personally, I would rather do this in the mix, but I can find that area and go, okay, let's tidy that up. We obviously have to worry about, is that going to affect the rest of the piece? But seeing this as a display, we can't make piece decisions as such. Yes, it has given us a little bit of a scoop because we're working quite aggressively here. Let's pop this into mono. See if it keeps my decisions. The reason I'm choosing material like this to show as well is that it's all very well to show only aggressive mixes, only the beaty mixes, like that's all that matters. If you want to surprise people, you've got to go outside of that. So this sort of piece we probably do want to work a lot slower. Yeah, and would be nice to be able to bypass this. That's the thing I will put onto the bad. Could we bypass the EQ, any EQ changes that we've made, so that we can sort of go, is that better or not? At the moment I'm going to say, let's just get him out of the game, because he is queering this setup. So sounds nice. Let's pull in. Just want to decide which bits we want to listen to. I'm going to say primarily the bass. Let's see. At that point, we've got a nice transition. Whether that's good or bad for the piece, we're going to find out. Yeah, it's actually emphasizing you've got this bass and then the kick drum that comes in. They sort of syncopate against each other, and it's emphasizing that. Again, whether that's good for the whole piece is a whole other story, but we're just working in little fine details here. I would need to sit back and listen to the whole piece in speakers to say, hey, is that a good move? But I'm showing you how we can target a thing. Like if we're listening to that and go, I wish I could, that would change the feel, not the sound, not the perfectness, but just the groove of the piece, then we can target it by going, okay, that's a bit, that's the transition, goodie-o. Let's open up our top end. Again, let's decide what. Let's grab some of that high as a mid as well and see what we get. Okay, happy enough with that. Let's relax it just a little bit. Because we don't want to be crushing our highs, because suddenly we've made it dull. And it's important, this big brass section. A little flat now. And a liveliness. Some of the liveliness will be through the 4K circuit, some of it will be just that things are moving differently. Again, I would be obviously being very, very careful that when I sit back and I listen to the mix, not only here in the studio on speakers, but with the system in the lounge, which is cheap Sony, some antique kind of a thing, an old, very grey thing, but sounds great for checking. I will have watched some telly so that the brains let go a little bit and hear this, and if I feel like there's this kind of weird tension, then we would revise. But for the moment, just based on what we're doing, I'm going to say that's working really, really nicely. It's bringing a nice sparkle that's understated but elegant. And that is really, really good. We are getting nice movement, that ability to quite precisely deal in and find a point of, yep, that's going to make that work a little bit nicer. So all really, really good. I think that's pretty well all it does, and that's good. Oh, you can bring in an external key signal for any or all of these. Meaning that, yes, you can fly in your kick drum and make the whole rest of the piece go every time the kick drum goes. Why you would do that, I do not know, because it's incredibly poor mixing. If that's the only way you can make your bass work, this is not a good plan, but yes, you can do it. There are sometimes reasons to want to do this, so the option is there. Interesting, there's no mid-side, but I really couldn't give a flying banana peel because I really couldn't care less about mid-side. So my bottom line is I think that it's a very elegant device that's really nicely laid out. So many of these things where they're like where the most perfectest turn out to be, well, pretty poor quality. This, at least on initial look, presents as very nice quality, very elegantly put together. This required a little bit of thought and understanding, but it makes perfect sense in the end to be able to do the EQ-y thing. As I say, it would perhaps be nice to be able to bypass just EQ changes, but that may be a little complex. This is easy to see, it's easy to drag around, Control-Z works. And overall, all of this interface is really nice and clear and not adding layers of stress. Because its job is supposed to be to help me get the music to feel right. If it's adding layers of stress with like kind of graphics or over technicalities to make me feel, then it's not doing its job. Again, sound is good. The 4K thing is, I believe, a little bit of a mystery. I think it might be their secret herbs and spices, but it sounds good. Anything that you don't need is not intrusive, like the mix balance, I think is a, why on earth would you want that? But some people tell me, you're missing out. I know, because he keeps telling me, you're missing out. No, I'm not missing out, dude. I tried it. Don't dig it. But the fact that it's not intrusive is great. It is a minor feature. Its CPU obviously is okay. Popping out of HQ mode does noticeably drop CPU, but that's to be expected. But it sounds good at normal mode too. And interestingly, its oversampling is not reporting any plugin delay. So either it doesn't report properly and Reason doesn't pick it up, or it doesn't create plugin delay. Well, that's kind of cool if that's the case. If its oversampling works nicely with that, or whatever their HQ mode is, then that's cool. RTFM, that should explain what, if anything, is going on there. I'm sure something's going on. So bottom line, I think if you're looking for something like this, then this is truly elegant. I like the fact that you really can run it as a single band, because that's where I'd always be starting. If I had this, if this magically appeared in my my Reason roster, then I would seriously look at saying, okay, because I'd normally use the M class in Reason for doing this. No, it's not there. It's normally there in everything, the gold coloured, because it's just a little bit more adaptable than the, do you want option A, B, C, or D? Which is why I use it. But this obviously has a very, very nice feel and is designed for this exact purpose of finding the groove. Not that you can't do it with any other compressor, but some compressors it's better than others, and this was designed for the very task. The fact that you can go out into multiple versions thereof is pretty cool. So I think it's an elegant device that's probably pretty fairly priced. It's not cheap, but it's not stupidly priced. It doesn't seem to have pretensions of grandeur on itself. You can go down the subscription thing, but not a fan of that route. I want to own my tools and not have them disappear for any reason. Yes, sooner or later they will become antiquated and fall off the edge of the universe, but why have that happen or have the risk of that happening? But you can make your own peace with that approach to tool ownership. Does it do the job that it sets out to do? Yes. Elegantly, easily to use, sounds good. It feels nice. It's not just a case of like, oh yeah, there are no digital errors. It feels right. It does add the kind of wave-shape distortion that you would expect in an analog unit. I think that's fair in the situation. I don't think it's posy that it's there. I think it's fair because that can be part of what you're looking for. You can be going, ooh, I'm just gonna make this, wave shape just that little bit for that little bit of extra excitement that it brings. Take extreme care doing it. Obviously, I hear it a lot more in these, but I did hear it in the speakers as well, and I think that that's a good design in the situation. Whether it's possible for them to have a button to take that out, I don't know. I don't know that it would even be a wise idea to have such a thing. They seem to have been very sparing and very thoughtful on the buttons that are there. So I'm going to say, good call overall. Again, just make sure that you don't overdo it. That's quite a bit of time, but my reviews are always quite a bit of time because we want to spend a lot of time looking at the alternatives and looking at ways that other people haven't looked at it. If you have any questions, down below, preferably after hitting subscribe, please don't be one of those champions that wants to use our channel for advertising themselves by trying to point out in some oblique way that I don't know what I'm talking about. That's just like, it shows that you are this kind of a dude. That's not a good look. It's a terrible form of advertising if you're going to try and advertise in somebody else's business. Plus, if you're going to do it, you need to watch the whole video and get your facts straight. Otherwise, you really do look like a weenie when you come up saying stuff that only a weenie who has no idea what they're talking about would try and enlarge their weenie by having a, I'm going to try and put you down and then try and prove how cool I am against you so that I can siphon business out of your thing. Don't be that weenie. And yes, there are a few of them that have happened on a slightly older video. Weenie is the only word for you, fellows. Do not do this. I'm happy to have an open discussion. If you are wanting to say, hey, but would this be another way of looking at it? Ask, hey, I see you said this here, I've heard that, or I thought this, what do you think about this? That's how professionals do things. You don't want to look like this, and nor do I want to see people engaging with us on that level. I'm a professional, and I do not like engaging with people who are unprofessional, trying to prove that they're more pro than me, because all it does is make them look like a... Alrighty, Benedict again for Higher Hertz. HigherHertz.com has a different stream of information. Tons and tons of videos here. Go out, learn. Most importantly, try the device. It is impressive. Have a great day.